So today we're going to be doing two overly sarcastic production videos, which is always a lot of fun when I get some time to check their stuff out. I find that I want to lean heavily towards like the literature stuff with them. Even though there is a lot of history stuff, I've been more curious about some of the literature elements. And here we're learning about the Iliad, which is the first of the two books we're going to be learning about today. And the next video is going to be about the Odyssey. They're both connected, and they're both books that I decided, hey, I want to read from the beginning. When I started my Assassin's Creed Odyssey playthrough, the gimmick of the playthrough is that I read a chapter, well, kind of a chapter. They considered chapters to be something different back then. But our idea of a chapter of the book, and then I play a little bit of Odyssey and I talk about the book like it's a book club. That didn't really work out all that well. And I'm not really enjoying reading the Iliad and Odyssey. It's kind of a pain to read. It's a style thing, I'm sure, and maybe it's more fun to listen to spoken as it would have been done originally, but I just didn't find it all that interesting. But I still want to know the story. So we're going to be doing this, and hopefully this will be a little bit easier for ya boy. So there we go. We're going to get started. Hopefully the bird doesn't get into too much trouble. I would show him, but he comes to me when he feels like it. He's doing something right now. So yeah, we're going to start with this one. Let's do it.
The Iliad is one monster of a book. It's more than 600 pages long, and the crazy part was it used to be passed down through oral tradition, meaning it was someone's job to memorize the damn thing and regurgitate it into the willing ears of whoever was listening. On top of that, if I had to guess how many named characters were in it, I'd put the number somewhere between 200 and too many. Luckily for...
One thing that I have learned when starting the Iliad and the Odyssey is this, and it's that the version of the story we have now is probably very different from the original story. There are liberties perhaps taken. There are maybe things that get lost from person to person, or things that get added over time. Homer is not somebody like the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Homer is not somebody we have a very firm grasp on. So that makes it incredibly interesting whenever you're dealing with it. It has a very historical element to it. There's like trying to understand the history of how this story has been told. So this goes beyond literature alone.
For us, though, there's only a few characters we actually need to care about. On the Trojan side, those are Hector, Paris, and Helen. And on the Greek side, we've got Achilles, Patroclus, Odysseus, Agamemnon, boo, Menelaus, Diomedes, Ajax the Greater, and Ajax the Lesser, along with a few others. Now, back in the day, Troy was called Ilias, which is why the book is called the Iliad. Translated literally, it'd be called Troy's Story. You got a friend in me. Yeah.
It may have come to your attention that the standard movie clip format in this introduction has been replaced with more anime-esque chibis. This change will persist for the rest of the review. Huh? Okay, I wouldn't know what the format is. I could find Troy is awful. Oh god.
Book 1. So our story begins 9 years into the Trojan War, when Agamemnon makes the dumbest decision of his life and pisses off Achilles, the most powerful warrior in his entire army. Basically, Agamemnon had taken this girl Chryseis prisoner, and her father, a priest of Apollo, came to try and get her back. He offered Agamemnon untold riches or whatever, which Agamemnon turned down on the principle of being an asshole. So predictably enough, this powerful and desperate priest of Apollo prayed to the god in question, who gladly started raining down plagues upon the Greek army. Agamemnon is somehow surprised that pissing off this super powerful deity could go so badly for him, but still refuses to return the girl until Achilles starts verbally slapping him around, to the point that Athena has to
So this is one of those things, the gods that they thought of were many, and they were petty, they were flawed, and they were much more reflections of human behavior than the god of like the Bible or whatever, which is thought to be like this perfect, all-knowing, all good, all right sort of dude. I think it's referred to in masculine terms. So that's one thing that I always found so interesting when I was reading it. It's that these people didn't really glorify their gods in the same way that a lot of Westerners do today.
But still refuses to return the girl until Achilles starts verbally slapping him around, to the point that Athena has to physically come down and stop him from straight up murdering his commanding officer. By the way, you may have noticed that there seem to be an awful lot of gods in this story. No, you ain't seen nothing yet. So Agamemnon finally agrees to return the girl to her father, but there's one condition. Achilles will, in exchange, have to give Agamemnon his chosen lady toy, a gorgeous lass named Briseis. Achilles, though thoroughly bummed, does the smart thing and gives her up. Then he does the not smart thing and refuses to fight. He curls up into a sulky blanket burrito in his tent and refuses to come out for anything. Now, Achilles is by far...
So this is him fighting... This whole conflict is fighting over women. But it's not like it's just like a love thing. It seems like it's more of a pride thing. Being able to take what belongs to the other. That being sort of emasculating to them from the looks of it. At least that's how I interpreted a lot of this stuff. It doesn't seem like it's just like this sort of love story where like these people genuinely care about each other as people. It just doesn't seem like they write about it like that. I could be wrong. I'm no expert on this, but it seems like it's more just an exercise of power, being able to take from someone.
Far the most powerful Greek warrior among them, later myths even painting him as invincible. So this is a pretty hefty loss for the Greek forces. Achilles then proceeds to make things even worse for them by praying to his mom, a minor goddess named Thetis, to get Zeus to help the Trojans. That's right, he's so pissed at Agamemnon that he's willing to make them lose the war out of spite. Of course, since I also hate Agamemnon, this doesn't really bother me all that much, but still, not cool, bro. Book 2. So, Zeus, as we all know, likes nothing better than screwing with mortals, so he's all for...
So you hear how it says book 1 and book 2. That's like their idea of chapters. They would have called it book 1 and book... It's just broken down differently from how we currently break down chapters. So when they say book 1, it's like saying chapter 1, basically.
For this plan, he sends a dream to Agamemnon urging him to attack Troy full force and promising him victory. So Agamemnon's like, great idea! Nothing bad has ever come from me listening to the gods. And then Hector hears a similar message from Zeus and immediately marshals his forces to attack. Book 3 is a list. It's just a list. The person rattling off the list is Helen, who punctuates her description of the Greeks with a lot of self-loathing commentary. But wait, this book actually has some action. Shock, I know. Menelaus, Helen's real husband, challenges Paris, Helen's current husband, to a duel. Paris is all for this plan, but there's just one problem. Paris is a total wimp. Menelaus kicks his ass, but before he can kill him and solve the war for good, Aphrodite decides to intervene and whisk Paris off the battlefield and off to Helen's chambers. Helen's like, God damn it, Aphrodite, what do you want? And Aphrodite's like, now kiss! Side note.
Yeah.
The interaction pretty much summarizes the entire dynamic between Paris, Helen, and Aphrodite. The story's a little more complicated than this, but basically, Aphrodite promised Paris the hand of the most beautiful woman in the world in exchange for a golden apple. Specifically, the golden apple of discord crafted by Ares, goddess of discord, who was pissed after not getting invited to a wedding. The other two contenders for the golden apple were Athena and Hera, who you'd think would have better things to do. He accepted, and Aphrodite held up her...
You think would have better things to do is like one of the big themes in this story, isn't it? Another thing that you'll find that I think is really interesting is that this all takes place kind of in the end of the war, sort of. Like the war has just been going on for like a while, and they don't feel the need to really... I don't know, how do I even explain this? It really leaves a lot of the actual warring out of it, considering how big this overall conflict really is.
End of the bargain by kidnapping Helen from her comfortable life as Menelaus' wife and delivering her to Paris, although some versions involve Paris kidnapping her himself. So basically, at this point, Aphrodite has done nothing but mess up Helen's life, and the whole war is also
so weird.
Her fault, so it's no surprise that nobody in the story really
shipping gone wrong.
Anyway, back to the actual plot. So back on the battlefield, Menelaus is an unholy degree of pissed, riding in circles, frothing at the mouth, yelling, "Come back here and die like a man!" You know the works. So then, in Book 4, the gods discuss what to do and decide that abject chaos is way more fun than peaceful resolution. So Athena pops down into the Trojan Trojan ranks and double dog dares an archer to shoot at Menelaus. The arrow whiffs, the temporary truce between the two armies immediately dissolves, and they all go back to wailing on each other. So book 5 is all about this lesser-known but incredibly badass Greek hero, Diomedes. So Diomedes is tearing through the Trojan army, you know, like you do, when Athena notices that two gods she particularly dislikes, Aphrodite and Ares, happen to be interfering with the battle. So she pops down to Diomedes like, hey, so I've given you magic.
I don't know if this has happened yet, or maybe she skipped over this, maybe this is about to happen. I know there's like this whole book or chapter that is just listing characters and telling you where they are. And I think that's kind of what broke my interest in this. I think I got a little further. I think I got around here. So I think from here on out, everything is kind of new to me, because I just didn't have the will to go much further.
Magic eyeballs. Now you can tell who's secretly a god and who's not. And let me be clear about this. Do not fight the gods. You will lose. Unless it's Aphrodite, then fight all you want. She's somewhere between marshmallow fluff and a baby chick in terms of battle prowess. So Diomedes acknowledges and continues to tear his way through the army, when suddenly he sees Aphrodite doing her thing and lifting one of her injured dudes off the battlefield. Diomedes is like, none of that! And
She's so strange.
So she's like, ow! And drops the dude in question and zips back to Olympus, whining incessantly. Meanwhile, back at the front, Apollo grabs the dude Aphrodite was trying to save. His name is Aeneas, by the way. He's got his own book or something, I don't know. And Diomedes immediately tries to stab him. Apollo's like, step off, kid. Some of us gods are a little sturdier than Aphrodite. And Diomedes does the smart thing and backs off. And then Ares shows up. Yay!
Hey!
So Athena's like, Diomedes, why aren't you hitting him? And he's like, because you told me not to? And she's like, forget what I said, kid. Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, it's the gods sometimes get so involved, it makes you wonder why they're just not fighting each other. It comes off as very so childish and mischievous as how they treat humans, because this could be a bigger conflict among the gods themselves, but there is this sort of unspoken understanding that I think they want to influence the people to take certain actions. They don't want to just go out and do everything themselves, but then there's all these different exceptions to the rule that make it so hard to really pin down their will, because it seems like they don't always want to get involved, but then they do, and I can't tell where the line is and what actually pushes them to take action. It's so confusing to me.
Aren't you hitting him? And he's like, because you told me not to? And she's like, forget what I said, kid. You're the best around! And then Diomedes stabs Ares in the gut, which video game logic tells me must make him the new god of war. So Ares runs home to Zeus crying, and Zeus is like, man up, you gigantic disappointment. So now Ares hurts on the outside and the inside. Book 6 is pretty boring. Someone tells Hector to tell the women of Troy to pray to Athena to stop Diomedes from single-handedly killing every single one of them. So he does, and they do, but she doesn't, and he continues to be awesome. Book 7 is a little more interesting. Apollo's like, hey Athena, you know what would be cool? If your chosen hero didn't end the war in one day. That'd be cool, right? And Athena's like, you make an excellent point. Let's stop the war and make Hector fight someone. So they pause the war again. You know, I really don't think it should be that easy. And the various Greek heroes we actually care about hold an impromptu lottery to see who gets to fight Hector. Great Ajax, not to be confused with lesser Ajax, wins the lottery, and he and Hector duke it out until nightfall, at which point they both call it a day and go home. So book 8 is called The Tide of Battle Turns, and that's basically what happens. The Greeks start losing and the Trojans start winning. Now it's time for book 9.
So there's the Trojans versus the Greeks. I believe the Greeks at this point are known as the Achaeans. I think that's what it was called. Like in the translation that I got, and it's been a minute. But I believe the Greeks would have been referred to as the Achaeans during this time, though they are virtually Greek, playing with their toys. Yeah. Okay.
Agamemnon's like, damn it!
Sorry, I got distracted reading the chat.
They're working against us. What do you know? So Agamemnon's like, I vote we run away. Who wants to run away? And Diomedes is like, you've got to be kidding me. You called us cowards and now you want us to cut and run? God, this guy is so cool. So Agamemnon's like, no. What I meant to say was, who wants to go talk to Achilles and get him to fight with us again? So he sends Ajax and Odysseus to talk to Achilles, who's still burritoed up in his tent with Patroclus. So Ajax and Odysseus are like, yo, Agamemnon,
Hey,
you your girlfriend back,
Odysseus.
a ridiculous amount of wealth and a few kingdoms if you get out there and help us fight. And Achilles is like, nope, he's a jerk. In fact, I sail home tomorrow unless something really tragic and unnecessary happens to make me stay and fight. Hey, if it isn't my best buddy Patroclus. I don't know what I'd do if this guy died. That, folks, is what we in the writing biz call foreshadowing. Book 10 is basically a Metal Gear Solid mission. Not even kidding. So it's night, and Agamemnon and Menelaus gather some main characters and are like, okay, do we have some volunteers to infiltrate the Trojan camp and find out their plans? And Diomedes is like, well, I did just finish carving a bloody canyon through the Trojan forces, so sure, I'm game. And Odysseus is like, you'll want me as well. I have actual cognitive faculties, quite rare among this army. So Odysseus, the only sneaky guy in the entire Greek army, gets partnered up with my man Diomedes.
Okay, so Odysseus actually does do stuff in the Iliad. Okay, I know he's like the main guy in the Odyssey, Odysseus, yeah. I didn't realize, I knew he was in the Iliad, but I was under the impression he basically did nothing. But I guess, wherever I heard that was wrong.
For a stealth mission. That's right, this epic officially has everything now. But at the same time, in the Trojan camp, Hector has the same idea, and sends a much less important character to scout the Greek ships. Predictably enough, the two stealth teams encounter each other, and Diomedes and Odysseus capture and interrogate the poor guy. He's like, I'll tell you everything! And Odysseus is like, ball in. And then they decapitate him. Using the information Odysseus extracted from him, they sneak into the Trojan camp and steal an extremely fancy chariot and some armor from a king.
Oh, this is Metal Gear. Okay, I haven't played it.
And it's back to war we go. So today
I was confused.
Agamemnon's time to shine. And while he's busy kicking ass and taking names, some minor hero that Achilles is fond of gets wounded. So Achilles is like, hey Patroclus, can you go out there and ask Nestor who that was? I need to make sure before I start feeling sad. So Patroclus does, and Nestor's like, hey, so it sure is nice of Achilles to feel bad when his friends start getting hurt. But, it'd be even better if, he helped out so that didn't happen. So yeah, can you maybe have a talk with him about that? And Patroclus is like, I only promise to try. Book 12, the war continues. Zeus smacks the Greeks with a thunderstorm, allowing the Trojans to start beating them. Man, divine intervention is such a hack. So this pushes the Greeks all the way back to the ships. And in book 13...
Honestly, a lot of the writing of this time would be considered very... It wouldn't be considered the greatest, narrative structure today. Obviously, we are so far removed from it that we have to kind of consider it in a bubble. But a lot of this writing feels, unsophisticated sometimes. Everything is a little bit too convenient. But it's also kind of that element where it's... The writing of old myths always feels like it's a little bit too surface level, I guess. There's kind of a commonality between a lot of different old myths where you feel it's hard for me today to immerse myself in it because the style and way of crafting a narrative is so much different. It's got all the big story beats and all the big stuff, but a lot of those smaller human moments, I don't see them as much. I don't find characters in these things particularly relatable. Sometimes they'll represent what seems like broad ideas, but they're so broad that they don't feel human or relatable.
Poseidon gets a little...
I don't know. I know I'm ranting a lot, and it may not feel like it makes sense. It's me trying to make sense of a very complicated, heavily studied work. So, go easy on me.
So he drops by to give the Greeks a little help by buffing the two Ajaxes with some stat boosts. So then the Greeks start winning. In book 14, Hera uses her feminine wiles to distract Zeus from his efforts to buff the Trojans and depower the Greeks. So the Greek army continues to win. In book 15, Zeus wakes up after being thoroughly wiled by Hera and gets mega pissed to see that his favored side is now losing. Ares is like, hey, I think one of my kids down there just died. This looks like a lovely excuse for war. And Athena dope slaps the armor off him like, idiot, Zeus is already mad enough. If you remind him how much of a failure you are, he'll get even madder. And Ares is like, oh. So the tide of battle turns again, and the Trojans start winning. At this point, it's really become formulaic. By the time book...
part of the reason it feels like a writing trope is because... it feels like a writing trope is because they were the ones that came up with the trope. Yes, yeah, you are correct. This is the building block for a lot of, the epic, I suppose. You give it the leeway that it deserves as the first thing. You don't get you don't criticize the first person to ever pick up a guitar for not playing like Jimi Hendrix. I get that part, but there is something incredibly unrelatable about some of the approaches to writing that, like, they had ordinary people existed. They were just not interested in understanding like the nitty gritty complex feelings. They were big cartoonish, like stage like feelings that, like, if this was being performed, you can feel it like without too much detail. You can understand the big idea. You know, those little subtleties didn't need to be there as much. Either that or they are there and I wasn't able to find or appreciate them as much. But it feels like the difference between like a stage performance and like a close-up and an on-camera performance. There's different levels of subtlety. This is just a different way of telling a story.
16 rolls around. Patroclus has gotten back to Achilles like, hey, dude, could I maybe persuade you to go out and fight? Our guys are kind of getting destroyed. I mean, even Agamemnon is injured. And Achilles is like, ha, nice. And Patroclus is like, seriously, Achilles, they're dying out there. They need our help. And Achilles is like, well, I really can't have them burn our ships. Tell you what, you go out in my armor and lead my army. The Trojans will never know the difference between us. And Patroclus is like, anything for you, man. And Achilles is like, just one thing. Promise me you'll come back alive.
They're gonna claim my whole stream for this one moment of music.
5 minutes later, Hector kills him. Book 17 is pretty uneventful. The Greeks see Patroclus go down and collectively hulk out to defend his body, and Hector takes Achilles' armor and wears it around. Book 18, the battle continues, although now it's centered around defending Patroclus' corpse. Meanwhile, Achilles is still burritoed up in his tent, having no idea that his bestie is currently dead. That is, until a messenger arrives bearing those very tidings, causing Achilles to similarly hulk out. He's like, that's it, time to single-handedly kick Troy's ass! And his mom Thetis is like, no, Achilles, you're fated to die if you fight! And he's like, I couldn't save my hetero-life partner, Mom, this life isn't worth living anymore! And then the rest of the chapter...
My hetero-life partner.
Making Achilles new duds. In book 19, Achilles puts on his new duds. Yeah, this epic kind of drags on in places. In book 20, Achilles carves a bloody murder canyon through the Trojan forces despite various gods' best attempts to stop him. In book 21, Achilles fills a river with so many corpses that the river itself gets pissed and starts trying to drown him. So he beats it up until it stops bothering him. Then he gets distracted and starts chasing Apollo around the city because all the best heroes have ADD. Just ask any side-questing Skyrim player. In book 22, Achilles finally remembers what he's there for, and after an extremely slapstick routine where he chases Hector around Troy several times, he finally kills him. Yay! Then he ties Hector's body to his chariot and rides it around Troy 3 times to parade the body off to Hector's father, the king.
Jeez.
And the rest of the book is, actually pretty boring. The Greeks hold Patroclus' funeral, during which they basically just play a lot of party games. And then, at some point after the Iliad cuts off, but before they officially sack Troy, Achilles gets shot in the heel by Paris and dies. Yay!
Okay. So, we're getting to we're at, like, basically the end of the Iliad. We're gonna go into the Odyssey. From what I'm aware, the Odyssey is much more well-liked as just, like, a more readable story today. I don't know if it has something to do with Odysseus specifically, because I know he's kind of the main focus of that story. And with that one, I have read a little bit of the Odyssey in excerpts that I was able to check out during some classic literature course that I took in community college, I think. I obviously, like, I was a bad student back then. I've mentioned this, but I do remember reading and discussing some elements of the Odyssey. So I might actually remember some of the stuff that ends up being talked about. We'll see. Oh, is this the credits? Is this like... I thought this was just a short thing, but it just keeps going. Good thing. This song. Okay, I'm just gonna... Yeah, there we go.
Happily ever I like to... So,
The Odyssey.
Or as I like to identify it, Troy Story 2, is something of a sequel to the Iliad, chronicling the various happily ever afters, or otherwise, of our favorite Greek heroes. But really, what it's mostly about is how much the universe hates Odysseus and wants him to suffer for as long as humanly possible. Seriously, in the 10 years it takes him to get from Troy to Ithaca, this guy gets put through more crap than a 20-pound bag of industrial-strength Huggies sized for incontinent bulls. So the Odyssey begins with our hero, who's been stranded on an island for 7 years with no company other than a gorgeous, lonely, immortal goddess by the name of Calypso. Terrible, right? Well, actually, it does kind of suck for him, because what he wants more than anything is to get back home to Ithaca, specifically back to his lovely wife Penelope and his now adult son Telemachus, who Odysseus hasn't seen since he was a baby. And in fact,
okay, I did know about this. This is like the premise, like it's the main premise, so I actually do know this stuff, and I believe like she has a bunch of male suitors who are basically trying to replace Odysseus while he's gone, and I know she has like a challenge for them or something that they have to complete, and only Odysseus could do it.
In fact, the story initially focuses on these two. See, since almost everyone thinks Odysseus is dead, Penelope is now widely considered to be Ithaca's most eligible bachelorette, and as a result, she's had more than 100 potential suitors queuing up in her castle, demanding that she pick one of them to marry her and become the new king. Her son Telemachus is none too pleased about the suitors throwing a never-ending frat party in his house. Now, by the time our story begins, most of the gods have decided that poor Odysseus has suffered enough at this point, so Athena disguises herself as a dude, drops down into Ithaca, and then tells Telemachus, "Hey, your dad's alive! Maybe you should go try and find out where he is." So Telemachus, who's a pretty smart kid, immediately figures out that this dude is actually a god, and thus takes her at her word. But before he leaves, Telemachus tries, and fails, to get
genius.
out of his house. And they're like, "Ooh, is widow baby Telemachus gonna fight us?" And Telemachus is like, "Shut up! I'm gonna find my dad and he's gonna beat you up!" So Telemachus secretly assembles a small loyal crew, acquires a ship, and sets off in search of news. The first place he goes is Pylos, home to King Nestor. So Telemachus is like, "Hey, do you have any idea where my father is?" And Nestor's like, "Well, let me think back to when I last saw him. Oh right, it was 9 years ago, during the Trojan War. Agamemnon and Menelaus were arguing, which had split the army down the middle, so Odysseus, Diomedes, Menelaus, and I took our armies and left. Although Odysseus did turn back to head off Agamemnon, and that's the last time I saw him. I don't know what happened after that, though. Maybe you should go talk to Menelaus, see what he has to say about the matter." So Telemachus goes...
So it is kind of fascinating how not that far away Odysseus was. Maybe I just don't appreciate maritime travel in its own time, but the fact that where Odysseus was stuck was actually not even all that far in the grand scheme of things from where he meant to go, makes a lot of these events feel kind of ridiculous in the grand scheme of things. I don't know. Maybe I understand, like, maybe his ship was destroyed or something like that, and that made it difficult or whatever. But this is, if you know anything about Odysseus, I think he's like oddly resourceful. So I don't know how he couldn't sort it out.
off to Sparta and meets with Menelaus.
There's the joke that he really wasn't in that much of a rush to get home, even though that's the whole premise of the story.
Helen, now happily remarried, and Telemachus is like, "Yeah, can you tell me where my dad is?" And Menelaus is like, "First, let me tell you my story. Okay, so I was marooned on this tiny island off the coast of Egypt, right? When this goddess shows up, and she's like, 'Hey, you should talk to my dad, Proteus. He'll tell you how to get out of here.' So I went off and tackled the guy, but he starts shape-shifting, right? But he can't shake me that easily. So we got tired of that pretty quick, and he was like, 'Screw it, what do you want?' And I was like, 'Do your thing, oh god of telling me stuff.' And he's like, 'Fine, you're stranded here because you forgot to sacrifice to Zeus before you left. Also, Ajax the Lesser drowned, Agamemnon's dead, and Odysseus is stranded on Calypso's island.' And Telemachus is like, 'That's literally all I needed to hear.' But back in Ithaca, the suitors have learned—
Oh wait, Odysseus, he was stuck there. There was something like extra that he was having trouble leaving because of. I think there was something that was actually keeping him there. I don't know if it had something to do with the goddess there. What was it?
Left to find news of
I hope I remember it before she says it.
For some reason, so they start plotting to kill him as soon as he gets back. Man, Penelope sure knows how to pick him. Now, on Zeus's orders, Calypso finally lets Odysseus go, so he heads off homeward on a raft. But Poseidon, who's holding a grudge against him for reasons that'll be explained later, notices that he's trying to escape and whips up a huge storm in an effort to drown him. But Odysseus is far too badass to let a little thing like drowning get him down, and he's doing pretty well for himself when yet another goddess shows up, gives him a magic anti-drowning scarf, and then vanishes. And Odysseus is like, why would I need this when I have a perfectly serviceable raft? Okay then. So Odysseus swims all the way to nearby Phaeacia, drags himself into the forest, and passes out. So Athena, always looking out for Odysseus, zips over to the city and tells the princess Nausicaa, "Hey, you should go down to the forest." And she's like, "Great idea." So she heads over to the forest and finds Odysseus, just like Athena planned. So Nausicaa...
Like, humans have no freaking agency in these stories. They have no like personal agency at all. It's oh god, it's kind of frustrating that they can't do anything on their own in so many examples.
Brings him back to her parents, the king and queen, and Odysseus tells them the story of how he came to be stranded on Calypso's island. So it's just after the Greeks have sacked Troy, and Odysseus advises the others to quit while they're ahead and sail back to Greece. But of course they don't listen to him, and by next morning they're overrun by a retaliatory force. Odysseus and some of the others take the ships to escape, but Zeus is angry at the Greeks for their poor sportsmanship and sends a huge storm to blow them off course. Odysseus and his crew are swept far out to sea, and that's when the weird stuff starts happening. So first, they wash up at the land of the Lotus Eaters, which is populated by these really mellow dudes who eat lotuses. Anyone who eats a lotus mellows out and wants to stay there forever, so of course most of his shipmates eat them, and Odysseus has to drag his idiot crew back to the ships by force. So they set out again, only to wash up on the island of the Cyclopses, where they see
the Cyclops. Okay, I have actually I've actually read this excerpt. This part was what we discussed in that classic literature course that I didn't try too hard on at the time. But I recall this. This ends up getting kind of stupid towards the end, I think, but it was at least somewhat entertaining. Unlike most of the Iliad, which I didn't find very entertaining, this was actually entertaining.
Surrounded by delicious-looking flocks of sheep. Unfortunately, the cave is home to a large, hungry Cyclops by the name of Polyphemus, who seals them in with an enormous rock, kills 2 of the crew, and then falls asleep. Since they can't kill him without trapping themselves in the cave, they bide their time until the next night, when Odysseus gets Polyphemus drunk, introduces himself as nobody, and then when Polyphemus passes out, they take a large wooden stake and stab out his eye. So Polyphemus is like,
"Ah, help! Nobody blinded me!"
and all his Cyclops friends are like,
Yeah, you're hilarious. Polyphemus is nobody stealing your flocks too.
So Polyphemus opens the cave to check, and Odysseus and remaining crew bolt for the ships. Then Odysseus, remember...
Yeah, it's like literally a word game. It's that who's on first thing, where you just replace somebody's name with a word. That was like one of the big moments in this epic. Nobody blinded me. Nobody's killing me. Nobody's doing that. But like he's saying it as a name. But like any rational person would just say, someone's killing me. It's like he's stuck. It's stupid. It is very stupid. It's kind of funny. If it's meant to be comical, it's hilarious. But I don't think it was meant to be that funny. I think it was meant to be clever.
The wisest of the Greeks takes it into his head to taunt the Cyclops. So he's like, hey, guess what, dumbass? My name's not nobody. It's Odysseus. And Polyphemus is like,
Dad, Odysseus gouged out my eye.
So funny story. All Cyclopses are children of Poseidon. So Poseidon hears about this and he's like, oh, really?
Oh, he mad.
Disproportionate retribution. So after that point, he starts trying to make Odysseus' journey home just as difficult as godly possible. So after that little adventure,
okay, there we go.
Aeolian Island.
Okay, that's what did it. Okay, that's what slowed him down. It was Poseidon because he had to be a jerk.
The king very nicely gives them a magic leather pouch full of wind to speed them on their way home. But we can't give Odysseus a break just yet. They're maybe 10 feet off the coast of Ithaca when his idiot crew decides that the magic bag has gold in it and busts it open. The resulting hurricane sweeps them all the way back to the Aeolian Island. So Odysseus is like, hey, got another one of those magic wind bags? But the king's like, not for you, dude. You've got to be super cursed to have that bad luck. Get off my island. So next they arrive on the Lastrygonian island, populated entirely by cannibal giants. When they start eating the majority of Odysseus' crew, Odysseus and the other survivors get out of there as fast as humanly possible. Next on this mythological island world tour, they come to the Aeaean island, where Circe, the daughter of Helios, lives. Circe is a sorceress, and some wicked hankering for bacon makes her take it into her head to turn Odysseus' rapidly dwindling crew into pigs. Odysseus learns of their tragic swinification and resolves to rescue them. So Hermes gives Odysseus some anti-magic drugs so that Circe won't be able to enchant him. You know, for someone who the gods supposedly hate, Odysseus sure does seem to get a lot of help from them. So Circe's like, here, have some enchanted booze, and Odysseus is like, awesome, drinks it, fails to turn into a pig, and then draws a sword on her. So she's like, wait, I'm a mage, I have like 2 hit points, and he's like, then I suggest you turn them back before I have to whittle that number down to 0. So she does, and then they all chillax on the island for like a year. So then Odysseus is like, yeah, we should probably be getting back. And so
there we go.
Fine with me, but first you gotta go talk to Tiresias. I mean, he's the one who knows how to get you home.
Like he did everything at such a leisurely pace. Like I don't know if they just don't want to go to sea to face more of Poseidon's wrath or whatever, but like waiting for a year felt weird. I don't know. Everything seems like it takes forever back then.
Oh yeah? Where can I find him? He's dead. So Odysseus and crew sail down to Hades. They do this wacky ghost summoning ritual, which ends up attracting a few other ghosts they weren't looking for, and then Tiresias shows up. He's like, "What's up, Odysseus?" Poseidon's determined to screw you over, but you all might make it back as long as you don't harm Helios's pet cows that can be found on Thrinacia. If you do, though, your entire crew will die and you'll be home, like, super late. And Odysseus is like, "Cool, you heard the man, folks. No hurting the cows." Then Odysseus has a little touching reunion with the ghosts of all his now-dead Greek war buddies, like Agamemnon, very grumpy at being dead, Achilles and Patroclus, now hetero-death partners, and great agents. Then Odysseus sails out of Hades and back to Aea, where Circe maps out the route back to Ithaca, which for some reason is extremely densely populated by monsters. So first, they find the island of the Sirens, who sing so beautifully that anyone who hears them will be entranced, jump off the boat, and swim to their deaths. So the crew block their ears with beeswax and keep rowing, but Odysseus is really determined to hear their song, so he has them tie him to the mast so he can listen without doing anything stupid. The Sirens are like, and Odysseus is like, "Release me, I must hear their dulcet tones up close." And his crew is like, "What?" So they get out of earshot of the Sirens, only to encounter the monsters Scylla and Charybdis. So Scylla is one ugly piece of work. She's a six-headed monster at the top of a giant craggy cliff, whose heads reach all the way down to the ocean to devour any unfortunates who happen to drift too close. Charybdis is like a combination garbage disposal and malfunctioning garbage disposal that sucks in the ocean and then spits it back out again. So, as they're trying to find a way to sail between the two without running into either the cliff or Charybdis, Scylla eats 6 of his crew members. On the bright side, this means her mouths are full, so she can't eat any more of them. So Odysseus and crew take the opportunity to gun it between them. They finally come across Thrinacia, more easily pronounced as the island of...
Everything is so conveniently inconvenient. Maybe that might be the best point I can make. Everything is conveniently inconvenient. It seems like things are inconvenient, but they work around things in such an implausible way. Oh, I don't even know what to do with this. I feel like my commentary isn't great because like I'm not grasping it properly, or maybe this is just a stupid story sometimes.
Where, despite Odysseus' prophecy-based protests, they land and rest for the night. But then, Zeus strands them on the island for more than a month. At this point, the food Circe gave them starts to run out, and Eurylochus, a somewhat mutinous crew member who's inexplicably survived everything up till this point, is like, "Hey, what if we sacrificed one of these lovely golden cows to the gods? We'd get to eat it and leave the island." And Odysseus is like, "Damn it, what did Tiresias say?" And Eurylochus is like,
"Just don't do that."
"You have killed one." So when they finally set sail, Zeus hits the ship with lightning. The boat explodes, the entire crew dies, and Odysseus is left clinging to a single timber from the boat, silently contemplating where everything went wrong. Then, adding insult to injury, Zeus sends a wind to blow Odysseus back to Charybdis, who eats the rest of the boat. A few hours later, when Charybdis pukes up the timber, Odysseus hops onto what's left of the boat and paddles the hell out of there. 9 days later, he washes up on the shore of Calypso's
conveniently inconvenient.
History. So Odysseus finishes telling his story, and the king is like, "Dang, dude, want a boat?" And Odysseus is like, "Yes, please." So the king gives him a ship and crew along with a few tons of fine treasure, and Odysseus naps all the way back to Ithaca. And who can blame him? So that's the end, right?
And that was it.
That's it, right? Nope, we're barely halfway.
Oh, wait, what?
And who can blame him? So that's the end, right? He's made it back to Ithaca, so that's it, right? Nope, we're barely halfway through this book. Come on, give the man a break! So Odysseus is finally home in Ithaca, but there's one small problem. The suitors are still making trouble all up in his backyard. But Athena, as always, has a plan. She magically disguises him as an old man, then goes off to Sparta to bring Telemachus home for the reunion. Odysseus, now disguised, goes off to talk to some loyal swineherd. Meanwhile, in Sparta, Athena's like, "Yo, Telemachus, get your butt home." So Telemachus sets sail for home, along with several gifts from Menelaus and Helen. Oh, and he's also joined by this dude, Theoclymenus, who's a prophet and a fugitive from Argos. While Odysseus and the swineherd bond, Telemachus and Theoclymenus arrive at Ithaca, and, knowing that the palace isn't necessarily safe for either of them, immediately head off to the friendly neighborhood swineherd's house. So Telemachus is like, "Swineherd, my man, how are things up at the castle?" And the swineherd is like, "Oh, still pretty bad." And Telemachus is like, "Oh, good, nothing's changed." And Odysseus is like, "Come on, kid, man up. Why are you letting these suitors strut around your house as if they own the place? I mean, if I were, say, the king himself, returned in secret from all his travels, why, I'd strut right in there and kill all of them." And Telemachus is like, "Yeah, you're right. It's just too bad you're not him." And then Athena's like, "Hey, Odysseus, I've decided you should reveal yourself to your son," and rips the illusion off of him. So Odysseus is like, "Hey, son, I'm home."
Zero agency. It's kind of a gripe I have with some forms of writing, even to this day, but this kind of does it in such a brazen way. Like, totally unashamed of how little choice any individual character has. Bad things are not informed by the characters. Well, that's not true. Bad things are kind of caused by the characters very often, but a lot of the way in which they move through this story is like Like, if in any story it was revealed that, hey, you didn't make any of your actual choices, we were making those choices for you the whole time, it would make a lot of the stuff that happened beforehand feel a little pointless. You know, you want your characters to have agency. Like, as somebody who likes creative writing and that stuff, it just, I have so much trouble connecting to this kind of storytelling that rips so much away from the characters that we're actually supposed to be really invested in, like Odysseus. I'm sure back when this was like new and being sung to people and wherever, they were probably more interested in the gods. The gods were probably the more exciting thing here. From where I am, the humans are the more exciting thing. But it seems like they can't do anything without the gods.
And Telemachus is like, Dad! And it's all super heartwarming. Pause for a moment to absorb the feels. So Odysseus and Telemachus start plotting their revenge on the suitors. Meanwhile, back in the castle, Penelope and the suitors, a good name for a band by the way, learn from the swineherd that
Zero agency and there is no way out of faith is kind of a theme in all things Greek. Yeah. Oedipus Rex, yeah, absolutely. That is one that I actually do know. It's like, they tell you basically how the story is going to end, and then they get you to the end. But that one at least kind of subverts your expectations a little bit. That is kind of a fun element of that story. You think things are going down one way, but they like... There is something kind of clever to this. Nothing here feels particularly clever.
Telemachus is back, and the suitors are like, damn it, our ambush has failed.
Hades is a Chad. Yeah.
Tell everyone that we tried to kill him. And Penelope is like, what? How dare you plot to kill my son? And they're like, what? No, we didn't say that. And she's like, oh, okay. So the next day, Telemachus returns to the palace, while Odysseus, once again disguised as a beggar, goes into town. So Telemachus tells Penelope about his journey, although he leaves out the part about Odysseus, and his new prophet buddy, Theoclymenus, is like, the really weird thing is, I'm getting a sense that Odysseus is here in Ithaca. And Penelope's like, man, that's just ridiculous. Meanwhile, Odysseus and the swineherd head for the palace, where the disguised Odysseus is immediately recognized by his old dog, Argos. God, this story is so adorable. Then the dog dies.
What?
Why?
Why?
So beggar Odysseus begs scraps of foods from the suitors, who generally oblige, except for this one guy.
That's like the Futurama dog, except the dog just... Well, that dog died eventually, of course. Oh, man.
Throws a stool at him. So the suitors get pretty boozed up and start talking smack to Odysseus, but then Telemachus is like, sleep it off, you drunks, and they all go to bed. Then Odysseus and Telemachus put their plan into motion. First, they hide all the suitors' armor and weapons upstairs. Then Odysseus goes to talk to Penelope, who he promises that before the end of the month, Odysseus will return. Hint. Hint. Penelope asks beggar Odysseus if he thinks she should remarry, and Odysseus is like, no, I'm sure your husband will be back real soon to murder all your suitors. Don't sweat it. And she's like, man, I don't know. Tell you what, tomorrow I'll hold a contest among the suitors and anyone else who wants to try, and only
there it is.
Just like Odysseus will be able to win and become my husband. And Odysseus is like, that's a great plan, do exactly that. So the next day all the suitors assemble, still trying to figure out how to discreetly murder Telemachus, when Penelope unveils her secret plan. So, some context. Odysseus had this crazy strong recurve bow. It was a really cool bow, but it was a present and he never ever took it to war, so it was still locked up safely in the palace basement when he left for Troy. Now, this bow is ridiculously strong, but Odysseus never had any trouble dealing with it because, as mentioned previously, he's a badass. So Penelope's like, all right, everyone, no more delays. I'll marry the man who can string this bow most easily and then use it to shoot through these 12 axe heads. Now, this bow has a draw strength of something like 500 pounds, so none of the suitors can even bend the bow far enough to string it.
Not even close.
Beggar Odysseus is like, hey, just for kicks, can I have a look at that bow? And the suitors are like, sure.
I mean, there's so many demigods in this world, like anybody could just run up on you and be related to the gods and have that kind of power, it feels like. But then it comes to this, and for some reason it's like a rare trait. It's so weird.
It's gonna be good. And then, of course, Odysseus strings the bow easily. Then he casually shoots an arrow through all 12 axes, and then it's murdering time. Odysseus reveals himself in all his glory, the suitors start panicking, and Odysseus and Telemachus engage in some healthy father-son bonding by killing nearly all of them. After bloody vengeance on his enemies, and then after a nice long bath, Odysseus is finally reunited with Penelope. Then Athena persuades the entire rest of Ithaca not to take vengeance on Odysseus for killing the entire noble population, and they all lived happily ever after.
Seems like a nice story. Okay, I think they might have had copyrighted music here, but they're Because it sounded like it was going to play one song and now it's playing another song. The Odyssey is so freaking long and I didn't. Yeah, like altogether, the Odyssey and Iliad, I think somebody in the comments did the math on it and that it was like, at least it's on a biblical scale, like how big that story is. It's kind of insane. Maybe Greek myths aren't for me. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just a style that, like, you don't go into a movie and judge it for what it's not, you know? You don't walk into, like, an action flick and get mad that it's not a romantic comedy. You know, you have to have a certain degree of respect for what it's trying to be. So I can't hate on the Iliad and Odyssey that much, but I will say that this sort of style, like this epic style, doesn't really speak to me a ton. Like, it's not like I've never liked any epics. Like, I'm a One Piece fan. That's it. That's a modern epic if anyone has ever done one. The scale is incredible, but like there is kind of the level of character agency that makes me a little bit more comfortable with it. But overall, it's just not for me. I think that's fair. So that was weird. That was a weird one. Journey to the West is superior. I've thought about checking out Journey to the West. Never bothered with it. Never bothered with any of these sorts of stories all that much. And I want to know about them because I know that they're culturally significant. Not really because I have genuine interest in them, but I understand that these types of stories, these sorts of epics, have such deep roots in a lot of other entertainment that we consume. So it would be good to understand that stuff, and it can give you a greater appreciation of some of the modern stuff. Like, I get that. I totally understand that. But it still is hard to get through some of it if you're not all in on this style, you know? Because it is a huge commitment, especially with stories as long as this one was right here.